This is Where We Live on Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. It's fair to say he's beloved in Connecticut. Walt Woodward has been our state historian for nearly 2 decades, but next year he'll retire. The search for his replacement has begun. Today, Where We Live, Woodward joins us, and we talk to historian and UConn professor Manisha Sinha, who's leading the search. And later, the City of New London will soon unveil a Black Heritage Trail. We learn about the inspiration behind the trail, and we want to hear from you too. How do you think about public history? Are there chapters of Connecticut history that you want to learn more about? You can join us, 888-720-9677. That's 888-720-WNPR. Share a comment on our Facebook page and find us on Twitter @Where We Live. Walt Woodward, Connecticut State Historian, joins us now on Zoom. Walt, welcome back.
Good morning, Lucy. Thank you.
Oh, Walt, are you still there? Walt, you just broke up. Can you hear me now?
Oh, I'm so sorry. How is this? Any better?
Yes, I can hear you now. So thanks for joining the show again. And I guess I should start off by saying, say it ain't so, Walt. You're really retiring?
Oh, no, it's time. I'm really happy. I've had, 17 years in the best job in history, and it's time to let someone else take the reins.
So when we talk about the state historian role, just to be clear, you aren't involved in the search for this new person, but talk about what your hopes are for this role, having been in it for 17 years now.
Well, one of the best things about the job I have is that this is one of the few jobs you can have that is really a hybrid academic and public-facing history job. And what makes that so wonderful is that you have one foot in the world of teaching and research and the kind of scholarly work that is at the foundation of history. And then you have this whole other side of your career that is public-facing and connecting the people of Connecticut, in my case, with all these wonderful ideas that scholarship produces. So what I hope for the next state historian is that they have that passion for bringing history to the public and really connecting the people of Connecticut with the amazing history of this state. If they bring the same kind of feel for it that has energized me throughout this, I think it'll be terrific.
Mm. You've been on the show before, and listeners hear you on Connecticut Public Radio often. I'm wondering if you can talk more about the history of the state historian, because really you're only the 5th person in this role.
Yeah, it is a really interesting history. The position of state historian was created back in 1935 when the state celebrated its 300th anniversary. And for people who don't know, that was an absolutely pull out all the stops event. They had exhibitions, they had parades in every state. There was one parade where they estimate that half the people of Connecticut actually either participated in or viewed it. And as they were gearing up for that event, they appointed a state historian both to advise on the different events, but also to oversee a series of publications on Connecticut history. There were a series of 69 pamphlets. They're called the Blueback pamphlets, and they were published over a number of years, and the state historian position was created to continue after the tercentenary and supervise the publication of those pamphlets. The first state historian was named George Dutcher, and he served as a member of the State Library Board. He was paid by them to supervise the publications, and that work morphed into publishing the public records of the state of Connecticut. He was succeeded in 1941 by Edward Larrabee, who was the renowned publisher of the Benjamin Franklin Papers, who continued for 10 years as a state historian of Connecticut. He focused on the public records. In 1951, Albert Van Dusen, who was at the University of Connecticut, became the state historian, and he really, I think, began that academic hybrid focus. He published a book on Connecticut history that's still one, it's a coffee table history. There hasn't been one like it since then. And that was, that went into several editions. It sold over 30,000 copies. It was kind of a high watermark for textbook publishing on Connecticut history. He was succeeded by my predecessor, Christopher Collier, who was a very active constitutional historian and legal scholar. And he helped establish the infrastructure that connects academic and public history today in Connecticut. So he was instrumental in founding the Association for the Study of Connecticut History. He helped establish the journal, the Connecticut History Review, and he was very active in teacher education. And he, like me, I think, did that scholarly and public-facing role. I came into the job in 2004 and sought to continue that legacy and really put an emphasis on connecting the people of Connecticut with their history, because it seemed that over the years people had really become disengaged from that topic.
Right. Again, you're hearing Walt Woodward, Connecticut State Historian. Walt's going to retire next year, and there's a search underway for his replacement. We're going to be talking about that coming up here on Where We Live. But Walt, when you mentioned that you began in 2004, a lot has changed since then, and we think about the digital world we live in and how you've had to adapt in this role and, the future of this role for our listeners and our residents when we think about engaging people in history.
It's really interesting. In preparing to come on the show, I was looking back at actually some information on Kit Collier, and I saw an article that the Hartford Courant published when he retired, and it was a very glowing encomium to him. And then in the last sentence, it said, his replacement is Walter Woodward, a person who comes to history from the advertising profession. Perhaps he can bring those skills to bear on history in Connecticut. And I laughed to myself because in many ways that's exactly what I did. I did come out of the advertising and communications industry before I became a historian, and I realized I saw that industry transformed by technology, and I knew coming into the history profession that it too was going to be transformed by the digital world. And so I embraced it early and have tried as state historian to really use the incredible reach of digital resources to make that connection with people as broad as possible.
And one of those connections is your podcast, Walt?
I do. With Connecticut Explored magazine, we have for several years now produced a podcast called Grating the Nutmeg. Of course, being the nutmeg state, we scratch beneath the surface. And we're up to, I think, 125, 126 episodes. And each of those are unique explorations into a topic in Connecticut history. And they're very broad-ranging, from a museum exhibit. I recently did one with Kevin Johnson, who is a reenactor a wonderful African-American reenactor who tells the story of Civil War soldiers and Revolutionary War heroes, African-Americans who fought in those conflicts. The range of stories in Grating the Nutmeg are really diverse, and it's a wonderful sampler of Connecticut history. If people are into podcasting, you can search in just about any of the podcast apps or podcast servers, Grating the Nutmeg, and sample one or two of the things. I think you'll enjoy it.
It's been a great resource for this show, Where We Live. Walt, again, is our Connecticut State Historian who'll be retiring next year. We're going to talk about the search to replace Walt. Say it ain't so, but it is, and it's a good time, as you mentioned, Walt, to retire. 17 years is a long time in this role, and it's an interesting moment in history when we think about what's happening in our country, how some of our nation's history, challenges people, and they're uncomfortable with it. And I'm wondering if you can talk about that.
Well, there is, I think this is a moment of reflection and a moment of real change in many people's thinking about what should be the focus of history and how it should be interpreted. And, even, right now, in some ways, I'm in the thick of it in a debate over whether the statue of John Mason should be removed from the state capitol. It's this kind of, reconsideration of the history that's been taken for granted for many years. It makes it such an exciting time in history and such a good moment, I think, for a new state historian to come in and really grapple with what I think are going to be some challenging issues in the years ahead.
You mentioned John Mason. Tell us about him. I believe he was responsible for the death of some Native people in our state.
Well, absolutely. And here is this is one of the places where I really feel uncomfortable because I think some people would say I'm on the wrong side of history in this one. I think I'm on the right side of it. But here's the situation. John Mason is decried by many people because of his role in what has come to be known as the massacre at Mystic. And that was a moment in the Pequot War when Connecticut soldiers and their Narragansett and Mohegan allies participated in an attack on a Pequot fort near what is today Groton. Mason and his English soldiers were inside the fort. They were faring really badly, and he ordered the fort torched. And in that conflagration, they estimate that as many as 400 to 700 men, women, and children died. It was a horrible carnage. And there are many people who feel that he absolutely does not deserve, because of that event, a place of honor on the state capitol. And I'm very sympathetic to that. I certainly see how Mason has become a kind of a symbol of the years of mistreatment that Connecticut's indigenous people received, not just as a result of the Pequot War, but from years of state oversight, state overseers, and the kind of treatment by the General Assembly over the years for Native people. And Mason has become the flashpoint in that struggle. And he's only one, I think, of many people who are valorized at the state capitol who could be reconsidered and found to be a little less noble than maybe prior generations thought they were. But again, as I suggested at the end of the day, for reasons that are far too long than to go into here, I come down in support of him staying on the Capitol, but having him joined there by the people who are completely absent, perhaps Uncas, the sachem of the Mohegans, and Sassacus, the sachem of the Pequots, both great leaders in their own time, or even people like culture keepers like Gladys Tantaquidgeon or the Fielding sisters, who actually helped hold their tribes together under this incredible, not effort, but, well, it was, I guess, an effort to have the tribes disappear. So I'd like to see, rather than Mason come down, I'd like to see important Native leaders join him so that we can use the Capitol to tell these very complicated and conflicted stories of Connecticut history.
You're hearing Walt Woodward, Connecticut State Historian. We're going to continue talking about this role, what it means for the state in terms of highlighting public history, connecting residents with the history in our state. You can join us, 888-720-9677, or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. This is Where We Live on Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. We know history matters, and in Connecticut we have a state historian whose job, in part, is to make history more tangible, more relevant to its residents. We're talking about the role because longtime state historian Walt Woodward will retire from the position at the end of the academic year, and UConn has begun to look for his replacement. Walt Woodward is with us on Zoom, and joining us now is Manisha Sinha, the Draper Chair in American History at UConn, who's leading the search for the next state historian. She's also the author of The Slave's Cause, A History of Abolition. Manisha, welcome to our show.
Thank you so much for having me, Lucy.
It was so interesting to hear Walt talk about the John Mason statue and the questions around whether he should remain there. That's emblematic, right, of the way that we look at history and how the context and the stories, the meaning can change. And these days, more people are learning about John Mason and question whether his statue should remain. So I'm wondering if you can talk about that in light of, looking for a new state historian and what that role is for our state.
Yes, so I really think that when we look back at our past and we tell complete stories that include perhaps the dispossession of Native Americans, the enslavement of African Americans, we get a better picture of our history. And when we are looking for a new Connecticut state historian, we would really like somebody who would bring all those diverse perspectives to bear in our history. I notice myself when I teach a Civil War course or any other course to my undergraduates, when we tell sanitized and somewhat ahistorical stories of our past, most people find history very boring. It really comes alive when you tell history in all its complexity. And I think it behooves us, especially today, when we are thinking about the future of American democracy, the state of our own state, Connecticut, and the American Republic as a whole, that we bring all these stories to bear, that citizens are informed and educated about our past. So we are really looking for somebody who would bring all those diverse perspectives to the position and who would be able to reach out to the citizens of our state in an informative manner.
You mentioned when we think about the job description in it, quote, developing a more diverse and inclusive view of the history of Connecticut. So when we think about that, what areas of expertise or scholarship are you looking for?
Well, we are really fishing broadly here. We have said we are interested in people who do Indigenous history, who do, racial, gender, urban, political. Your specialty could be in any one of these fields, but you should be able to address a broad range of issues that affects the state. And that's what Walt got to the position. What was interesting about the ways in which he dealt with many of these different aspects of Connecticut's history was that he was able to transcend his own specialization and really address all these issues. So, for instance, you just talked about the John Mason statue. As a Civil War historian, I have always been very against the memorialization of Confederate leaders and generals. I thought they had no redeeming qualities to them, traitors to the Republic who fought for slavery. And I was really thrilled when their statues started coming down, thanks to the massive protests by the Movement for Black Lives after the murder of George Floyd. And I think in New England, we need to also look back at our past and reckon with aspects of our history that we may not be very proud of. When we commemorate people on state grounds that are maintained by public taxes, we should really be mindful of all the people in our populations. And there is a substantial presence of Native Americans in our state. So I do think that these issues are definitely worth revisiting.
Again, you're hearing Manisha Sinha here on Where We Live. She's leading the search for the next state historian, Walt Woodward, retiring next year. Manisha, you made a point about how it's important not to present a sanitized history, and I wanted to bring into the conversation a listener, Paul Saubester, who's actually a volunteer researcher for the Hamden Historical Society. Paul, welcome to the show.
Oh, yes, very happy to be here.
So tell me about the work that you're doing. I understand that you started observing trends in racism in deeds and maps that you dug up, and then you started translating them in posts on your neighborhood Facebook group. Why did you do that, and what was the response?
Well, it was finding in the original deed to my house dating from 1950 this clause prohibiting occupancy for any purpose other than domestic employment by anyone other than the white race. And what I found really obnoxious, particularly about that, was how it was buried in the middle of a long list of routine specifications of lot sizes and building costs, et cetera. Like, they really wanted to hide it. So I did bring that to the attention in this group, and actually a whole group got founded to advocate for better housing choices in our particular neighborhood that has seen a lack of diversity in housing choices and racially.
Mm. So you mentioned that there's a whole group on Facebook now. So right. When this information is shared more widely in Hamden, what's the response from people who don't know this history?
Well, there was an effort this recently to amend the charter of Hamden. It's up for renewal this year, and among the things that would allow is for reform of the zoning laws. Unfortunately, that petition we had launched to reform the charter did not get enough signatures, but there'll still be hope to get it on the ballot eventually.
Mm. Well, thank you, Paul Saubester, for telling us a little bit about how you're taking the history in your town and connecting to a wider audience in Hamden. Manisha Sinha, I wanted to go back to you because I thought it was a great example of thinking about the history that is unknown and using social media to bring it to a wider audience to create a conversation.
Absolutely. I think that is just what's so wonderful about history. The kind of research that the previous speaker did is fascinating. It's really important that we understand that history is not myth-making. It's finding evidence and looking at things in a new way. It just does give us a more complete and whole picture of the past and tells us a bit about our present and where we would like to go in the future. So it's precisely that kind of wonderful historical research that I think should inform us and our public conversations about history. There is a tendency sometimes to dismiss certain new histories as, quote, politically correct history. But, this kind of research has been done for a long time and continues to be done, sometimes by our local historians who are, deeply immersed in local records. And they can really tell us some broad things about our past. So, yes, I think this is precisely the kinds of conversations that we should be having today, and how I envision the role of the state historian and how Walt actually fashioned it to be a place to sort of educate our citizens, but also to listen in and to have a sort of a give and take on what our public histories should look like.
Mm-hmm. So we mentioned that this is a balance between academic scholarship, but also public-facing duties. And so now that you've been advertising that this job will be available come next year, what are you hearing from people? Are you getting lots of recommendations for the 6th Connecticut State Historian?
Yes. Firstly, people are a little surprised to hear that we have such a position. And then they sort of say, well, what happened to Walt? We don't want him to go. And I said, neither do we, but it is his decision, indeed, to retire. and it'll be big shoes to fill. I'm getting a lot of interest from young historians who have been working on uncovering the sort of forgotten colonial histories of slavery, the slave trade. I myself am very interested in the history of abolition in New England as a whole, but also in Connecticut. So there is a lot of interest in the position. And I'm hoping that we get somebody who can, carry forth the sort of legacy of the position, but also bring perhaps digital expertise, bring some cutting edge scholarship that has been done on New England recently in the last few years. So yes, there is a lot of interest there, and I'm looking forward to simply, reading through all the files and finding someone who might be a worthy successor to Walt Woodward.
Mm. Oh, Walt, you're still with us. I imagine that also this person needs to be passionate about history, right? And talking with people.
Passion is the key, and if they bring a love for the history of this state to the position with them, they will succeed. And Manisha is right. I think the focus is it's a good time to be focused on telling complete stories and revisiting all of the history in thoughtful ways, and combine that with a passion for connecting ordinary people to the history of this state, and it's going to be that they will do the perfect job, and I'll be their biggest champion.
Walt, when you were on last, we were talking about your new book, and it was called Creating Connecticut, Critical Moments That Shaped a Great State. We were talking about the election cake, and people were so excited to hear from you, and that was a popular show. We hope to have you back even after retirement. I'm sure you'll be doing some very interesting things.
Thank you so much. Historians never retire. They just pursue new projects.
That's Walt Woodward, who is our Connecticut state historian. Again, he's still the state historian until the end of the academic year, but there's a search for his replacement, and we were talking with Manisha Sinha about that. She's leading the search. We're going to tweet out a link to the official job posting at Where We Live. Again, Professor Manisha Sinha and Walt Woodward, thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This is Where We Live on Connecticut Public Radio. Coming up, we're going to hear about the inspiration behind the Black Heritage Trail opening in the city of New London. First, it's our fall membership drive. You listen to Where We Live, so we talk to a lot of different people. We hit on a lot of different topics, and hopefully you learn a lot about the state we call home. Support the conversations you hear on Where We Live with a pledge of support. Here are two of my colleagues to tell you more.
Thanks for listening to Connecticut Public Radio here. I'm Patrick Scahill with Katie Tolarski, asking for your pledge of support for great local programs like Where We Live. The number that you can call to make that pledge is 1-800-584-2788, or go online to WNPR.org and make your pledge there. You can check out all our thank you gifts, and of course you can check out all the great programming that we have to offer to you for making that pledge. But do make the call right now, 1-800-584-2788 or WNPR.org. Hi, Katie.
Hi, Patrick. Good to be here with you today with the Where We Live team. If you are listening to this program right now, you know how long Where We Live has been on the air here in Connecticut, and all of the issues that we've covered. Every day we are bringing you new topics that are important for you to hear, that are helping you learn more about your state, your community, and hopefully you are appreciating that, and hopefully you will help us to support the programming like Where We Live here on Connecticut Public Radio. We can only do it with your support. The number, 1-800-584-2788, or go online. It's easy, ctpublic.org.
Yeah, and we do really view this, Katie, as a community service. This is a service that's obviously comes to you free of charge. You can choose whether or not you can support it. And if you're in a position where you can't, that's okay. There are people out there who can. And if that's you, please step up now to make that donation, not only for yourself, but for the community, to ensure that all these great conversations that you hear every single weekday here on Where We Live continue. These are conversations about art, conversations about music, conversations about social media and things that are in the news. And of course, Lucy is talking to elected officials like Governor Ned Lamont, Senate, House leadership, folks who are impacting your everyday life with the decisions that they're making. We hold them accountable here on this program. And Connecticut Public, our newsroom, holds these leaders accountable because you make that pledge of support. You make that donation. You make all that possible. So do make that call right now, 1-800-584-2788, or go to ctpublic.org, where we have that nice little donate button, which you can click, see all our thank you gifts, and make your pledge that way.
One great thank you item we have is the Where We Live ceramic mug. Of course, we have a new logo, new branding for Where We Live with a very cool asterisk design. So that, for a pledge of $6 a month, can be yours. You can show your support for the team and support Connecticut Public Radio and support, of course, Where We Live. Again, for $6 a month, that sustainer membership is so great for you. It's easy. You can know that you're supporting great programming here on Connecticut Public Radio. And again, it helps to support us over the coming year and months and years. So think about that when you do call right now, 1-800-584-2788, or again, online, ctpublic.org. Lots of thank you items. Of course, it is the LL Bean wreath season as well. So check that out when you're there, ctpublic.org.
Yeah, when you make that pledge, obviously you're supporting programs like Where We Live. You're also supporting other local programs that we have here, like the Colin McEnroe Show, Audacious with Kyone Wolf, and lots of other news and information that you can get every single day here. We can do that because of you. And we actually have a fun thank you gift that's sort of combining three of our shows. We don't want to mention too many thank you gifts here in the break, but it's related to the Where We Live mug. You can get the Where We Live mug, a Colin McEnroe mug, and an Audacious mug to a three, I don't know what you would call that, a combo, I guess, a three mug combo.
Yeah, I like the combo.
Yeah. And that's for a pledge of $12 a month. So if you're in a position where you can make that donation, please do it, because it does go so far here at this station to keep all this great journalism going. 1-800-584-2788 or ctpublic.org.
Think about how many times over the last year and a half, when we've been through a global pandemic, through a contentious presidential election, so many news items that you've turned to Connecticut Public Radio for. You've turned to Where We Live to hear updates from our elected officials, updates from the governor, updates from commissioners and scientists and people who are helping you understand what's happening in our world. Support that now. Call us 1-800-584-2788 or go online to ctpublic.org. And thanks.
That number is 1-800-584-2788 or WNPR.org. Make your pledge today, not only for yourself, but for the community, and thanks in advance for doing it.
This is Where We Live on Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. Do you know the stories of New London's Black heritage? A new public history project aims to highlight some of these stories and to inspire city residents and visitors too. Joining us now on Zoom is New London City Councilman Curtis Goodwin. He was so inspired by the story of one local historical figure. He launched a career in politics, and he set out to honor this person in what is now a 15-stop Black Heritage Trail that's opening later this week. Councilman Goodwin, welcome to our show.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So tell us about that pivotal presentation you attended, and you learned about someone named Ichabod Pease.
Yeah, that's correct. So just about 3 or so years ago, I stumbled across a presentation that just inspired me. Just hearing the stories of resilience, learning about someone who at 81 years old, who was, freed himself twice as a slave, decided to, continuing on and persevering to do so. Selfless acts things.
And so Ichabod Pease opened a school for New London's Black children in 1837 when he was 81 years old. He was born into slavery in the 18th century. This is someone that you didn't hear about growing up in New London.
No, unfortunately, in New London public school systems, not much is taught as it relates to Black history or Black culture in general. You know, the most you get into it is slavery or the Underground Railroad, but not many stories of resilience or stories that, you know, exist in your hometown.
And so fast forward to the launching of this Black Heritage Trail, Ichabod Pease being one of the people that'll be honored. And so talk through how you went about, you and others in this project, in highlighting particular stories, Councilman Goodwin.
Yeah, it was tough. I mean, there's so many. Lo and behold, you know, finding out that there was one and that inspiring me, and then, you know, trying to find 15 others, it becomes rather difficult. But I enlisted, you know, New London landmarks and entrusted them to coming up with what those top 15 would be. The number 15 wasn't something we just came up with. Because we were funded by a matching grant, we decided that would be the most amount that would be the most feasible.
And this will have 15 markers, but just the beginning, I understand, because you hope to also incorporate New London's Indigenous history. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I'm super excited. You know, it gets overwhelming talking about it, you know, to even get to this point. But we hope to embark on, you know, an Indigenous trail as well. New London, nor is New England a stranger to the intertwining of Indigenous roots within our community. So I just think it's important that we keep the conversation on history going because it's still living history. And we just, you know, tell it more inclusively and intentionally.
You mentioned New London landmarks. Also with us here on Zoom is Lonnie Braxton II. He's a historian of Black history who worked on this project, this Black Heritage Trail. His day job is Senior Assistant State's Attorney. And I can call you Braxton?
Yes. Good morning. And thanks for the opportunity. This was a great project. And Councilman Good inspired us all. You know, I grew up in Mississippi, and I've always been a fan of Westerns. And many years ago, there was a John Ford movie called The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. And one of the quotes was, "When legend becomes fact, print the legend." And one of the things that I found out in one of the sites that I was given to do the research on was called the Hotel Bristol. And it's a building downtown New London. I passed every day on my way to work at EB, walked by it when I walked through downtown, and it's on Bank Street. As it turns out, in 1919, Red Summer, 5,000 people surrounded the Hotel Bristol and attacked a number of Black sailors and patrons who were inside this hotel. And as I'm reading and doing the bit of research, finding out about this, it was interesting to see what some of the newspaper reports were throughout the country. However, some of the reports said that it was because the Black sailors had attacked a few white sailors. But the official report said that the Black sailors for a while had been being harassed, had made reports and what have you. But the London police made an arrest of 2 white sailors, and from that stemmed this riot. They called out the shore patrol. They called out the police. It was quite something. And on the May 30th, 1919 edition of the Evening Day, the newspaper of the day, it said, in an effort to clean up every Negro on the street, a mob of 400 or more white sailors, aided and abetted by several hundred civilians, ex-servicemen, and Marines, started a fight Thursday night that filled the principal streets of the city with a howling night of excited men and made it necessary to sound the riot call on the fire alarm at 10:36. And this was not the only incident of that year. About a month later to the day, a second incident took place. And that one wouldn't have been reported at all, but for the sailors who were the shore patrol on their way to this incident, hit a fire hydrant, causing damage, and there was a dispute between the City of New London and the subbase as to who was going to pay. And as a result of that, there was an actual reporting in the paper. Otherwise, it would have been lost to history.
So that's another example. Braxton. We heard earlier from the councilman talking about Ichabod Pease, someone who inspires, but also Hotel Bristol, as you mentioned, important to highlight these moments in history of sorrow, and that we need to confront them and not let them just be forgotten.
Well, history, is quite interesting, because I grew up where people would say things like, the truth will set you free. And we had a habit of thinking and believing that. And if you really believe it, we should run toward the truth. And New London, through the efforts of people like Councilman Good, the London Landmarks and others, we've done that. However, some people, instead of running toward the truth, run toward a myth and embrace it. And we've been fortunate here that we are trying to tell everyone's story, because it's all American history. It's not Black history. It's not one group's history. It's all of our history, because that's what made this place such a great place to live.
We heard from the councilman about 15 markers, just the beginning. Can you walk us through a couple more that will be unveiled on Thursday? And, again, what it's going to mean to you and others on this project to see this?
Well, one of the most exciting ones, I think, is the one for Spencer Lancaster. Mr. Lancaster is unique because he's alive in his mid-90s. And the Bristol Hotel happened in 1919. And when I came to London in 1968, there were still people alive who probably remember that incident. Well, unlike that case, we have Mr. Lancaster. We can ask him questions. He was a veteran. He was a civil rights activist. He was a father. He was a citizen. He was the first elected official in New London of color. So he paved the way for a lot of people. There's a quote that was made of Paul Robeson. He's the tallest tree in our forest. A second one would be Linwood Bland. He passed. He wrote a book, A View from the 60s. That book turned out to be the best seller that the London Historical Society has ever had. And it gave an awful lot of insight. Shiloh Baptist Church was another. It was pastored by Reverend Garvin. It was the oldest Black church in, if memory serves me correctly, in New London. There is the site of the burial place of Hercules and his wife, Flora. He was the governor of the Negroes. And it sounds strange, governor of the Negroes, but these people actually made petitions to the state legislature seeking the freedom for all of the people of color in the state.
We heard Councilman Goodwin say that earlier, growing up in New London, didn't learn about these figures in school. And so now with the launching of this Black Heritage Trail, not just visitors, but school children in New London will be able to see and read and learn about them. That must make you feel good.
This is going to be quite interesting. I think not only will the children learn about the history, anyone who comes to New London and happens to see one of those plaques will learn. Right. This is going to be posted on websites concerning the city. So it's an educational process, because without things like this, often you will think you didn't have a place and you didn't contribute. And what this will do for all of us is it will tell the story that we all participated. We all actually were involved in the making of New London.
Councilman Goodwin, you're still with us. Your response?
It makes me kind of speechless, to hear Lonnie and to have worked with such a group with so much depth. You have generations of Black history working on this project, where, in my opinion, it's a way for us to not only transform the narrative within the city or within our region, but also to reconcile with folks like Ichabod Pease and all those that are our ancestors that we stand on the backs of. Because I truly feel like, we stand on the backs of our ancestors and those like living history, Spencer Lancaster. So I'm just proud and encouraged And this just gives me inspiration to keep going.
Well, it's been a pleasure to hear about this project, this public history project with New London City Councilman Curtis Goodwin and Lonnie Braxton II, a historian of Black history who also worked on this project. I understand it'll be unveiled this Thursday at 4 p.m., beginning at Mr. Spencer Lancaster's home, followed by a ceremony at the Hempstead Houses. Thank you so much. We'll make sure we link it on our website for our listeners to learn more. We appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
This is Where We Live on Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. Katie Pellico produced today's show. Kat Pastor is our technical producer. As I mentioned earlier, it's the first week of Connecticut Public Radio's fall fundraising campaign. You learn a lot about your state here on this show. Support the conversations you hear with a pledge of support. Here are two of my colleagues to tell you more.
Thanks for listening to Where We Live here today on Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Katie Tolarski here with Patrick Scahill, saying thank you for listening and asking you to also support the programming here today, 1-800-584-2788 or ctpublic.org. Those are the ways that you can get in touch with us and become a member, become a part of the community of people that are, members of Connecticut Public Radio, that are supporters, that are curious, that are involved. Do it now. Help us to reach our goals, 1-800-584-2788 or ctpublic.org.
Yeah, and we obviously understand that you value this service because you're listening right now, and you do get something out of it. We are hoping that you value it enough to, if you are in a position to financially support it, make that donation now. We only come to you a few times a year to ask for that pledge, and that's really how it works here at this station. We rely on our members, on our listeners too, if they're in that position to support the station, to step up and do that. And maybe it's at the level of $6 a month, so you can get the Where We Live ceramic mug. Maybe it's at the level of $12 a month if you want a Where We Live mug and a Colin McEnroe mug and an Audacious mug as well. But really, at whatever level you can give, that donation is going to go so far here to help Lucy and her team continue to do the work that they do so well, interviewing people from all across the state, the nation, and in some cases the world, about their lives, their experiences, the things that they're working on, their stories. They can share that because you make that pledge. 1-800-584-2788, 1-800-584-2788, or ctpublic.org.
Patrick mentioned the $6 a month pledge level for the Where We Live mug, a great option and a great way for you to become a sustaining member of Connecticut Public Radio. So you know that your dollars will go and support us moving forward. If that's something that makes sense to you, please do it now. Please call us 1-800-584-2788 or ctpublic.org. So many thank you items on our website. But again, the important thing is that you're getting the news and information that you expect, the quality, in-depth reporting and conversations on Connecticut Public Radio. So call us now, 1-800-584-2788 or ctpublic.org.
And we do understand that obviously your life is very busy. You have a lot going on, and maybe you don't want to think in the future about giving your donation here to this station. You want to just think, hey, I'm a supporter. I just know I'm doing that. So we have a great solution for that. It's called our monthly sustainer program. It's been growing astronomically here, where folks basically say, hey, take a set amount off of my credit or debit card each month, and then I'm good. I know I'm supporting this service. It's really like a subscription to public radio. So that's another option at ctpublic.org, or give us a call at 1-800-584-2788. And thanks so much in advance.